Welcome to the Elite BSC podcast, where our entire focus is helping commercial janitorial contractors succeed. You want a growing company, a thriving team, and healthy profits, and we are here to help. My name is Jordan Tong. I'm the founder of Elite BSC, a company dedicated to helping janitorial companies grow and thrive. I also serve as CEO and one of the owners of France Building Services. France is a janitorial company employing nearly 600 people. Since 2007, we grew from 1.5 million to more than 20 million in annual revenue and built what I think is one of the best teams in the world. The goal of Elite BSC and this podcast is to give owners in the industry a vision of where their company can be and the information and tools to get there. I want to share what I have learned over the years to make this a reality for you. Hey guys, we're picking up in this episode on, this is part 2 of a 4-part series that I'm doing on prospecting, or the marketing side of the janitorial business development process. If you recall from the last episode, we talked about the need for going after bigger accounts and why that's a big deal. And then basically what the sales process is, how we start off by mapping out an ideal client profile, and then we start building a list, and then we start nurturing and engaging, so on and so forth, until we can land an account. And so last week we talked about, or in the last episode, we talked about the ideal client profile and why that is an important first step. And if you recall, we're laying the foundation for a good process, and the first place to start is learning what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to. And I think that can be important, especially if you're in a big market and especially if you're looking to scale up. So what we need in many ways is to cut down on the clutter of what we can go after, and instead of taking a shotgun approach, take more of a rifle approach to sales. And I think this is helpful. And I was having a conversation last night. Our company has a peer group with other cleaning companies in the industry, and we meet on site at somebody's company a couple times a year to do an audit. And so we are up, and so there's a handful of folks in here. We were having dinner last night, and we were talking about the sales process. And there's a lot of noise. I was just at this ISSA workshop, and you hear recently, and you hear a lot of people saying a lot of things, like, cold calling is dead, or you need to be doing X amount of emails, or a lot of people saying a lot of things. And you also have this generational divide where you have people in their 60s wanting to communicate one way, people in their 40s and 50s wanting to communicate another way, and people in their 30s wanting to communicate another way. And we sort of have to navigate those waters. And so what I'm not doing is giving you a foolproof silver bullet, here's how to market. But I do think that we're laying out a foundation, or maybe a set of principles or a big picture blueprint that we can then maybe modify tactically in order to get the results that we're looking for. So the 4 parts of the process that we're going to go through in this series is, part 1 is the ideal client profile, which we did last week. Now we're going to move on to building a list, which is part 2. And in the next 2 episodes, we'll talk about identifying a decision maker and outsource status, and then actually how to nurture those clients once you have established some sort of contact with someone there at the facility that you're trying to sell to. So let's talk about list building a little bit. So we've already built our ideal client profile, so we know, if you remember the 3 things we're looking at is, we want to know the location of the geographies we're wanting to work in. We want to know the vertical market segments, and then the size of customers that we're wanting to go after. And that size will look a little bit different in terms of some of the building characteristics, depending on the vertical market segment that it is. And so, armed with that criteria, that search criteria, we now need to go out and actually build a list. And so I want to talk about a couple of ways that we can do this. And part of it, part of this depends on how much time or money do you want to spend. So there is a sense on this particular point on building a list. If you have money to spend, you can shortcut the process a little bit and get a list built quicker if you're willing to spend money on the data. But you can also go about it with a more manual process that's going to save you a lot of money, but it's also going to take a decent amount of time to get that done. So let's talk about some of the paid options of list building, and then we'll move into some of the free sources. And then we'll talk for a minute about decision makers and identifying some potential decision makers. So, and just so you know, we do a lot of marketing work for clients, and including list building. And we use a combination of these tools. So we certainly pay for some data and pay a lot of money for some data. And but there are a handful of free things that we use very regularly throughout the search process. So I just want to unpack a few of those today. So in terms of paid sources, so the platform that we use is ZoomInfo, which is sort of it might be the biggest name in the field right now. It's certainly probably the most expensive one. They claim to have the best data and the most data. And, I have used a couple of other platforms that I've not been as satisfied with and not as happy with the data. But there are others that I've heard people mention that I've not used that they claim are good, and so that are significantly cheaper than ZoomInfo. And so I think if I was on a budget and really trying to really watch my expense, willing to invest a bit more time, I probably would still get some sort of data platform. I might not get ZoomInfo or one of these other more expensive options. So another more costly option is a platform called Convex, and it's a little bit different. It's pretty cool. Of course, it has weaknesses. I think it does really well in bigger markets, maybe not quite as well in some of the smaller markets. But you're able to drill down and look at building sizes and a handful of other things related to maintenance and stuff. So it's sort of built for the facilities industry. It's a data platform for that. And so, that's going to be on the more expensive end. But there are other ones like Apollo.ai, which is a platform someone recently mentioned to me that I'd heard of, but they said they find that it's very accurate. And it's significantly cheaper than ZoomInfo. There's other ones, trying to think here. Smart Lead is another one. There's a bunch of them. If you start Googling data platforms or list building platforms, you're going to find a lot of stuff there. So what this does, back in the old days, I would go to a Dun & Bradstreet and say, hey, here's my criteria. Can you cobble a list together for me? Well, now it's a bit more interactive, and you can start doing all that search stuff, and it's a subscription based now, and see all that stuff in real time. And it can be helpful, but you still have to learn how to use the platforms, and that does take some time. So that's going to be on the paid source, and I think on some level, paying for a little bit of data is always a good way to get the process kick-started for you. And then you can start supplementing. And again, this is what we do. So we utilize ZoomInfo to do big picture list building. And then as we're drilling down into the details, we'll use some of these, or maybe filling in the gaps, we use some of these free resources. So I'll give you a few of these. And if you reach out to me, if you email me, jordan@elitebsc.com, I've got some more resources that I can give you. I've got like a research guide that sort of tells you maybe where we find some things, publicly available stuff, along with titles of decision makers and that sort of thing that we're looking for based on the different segments. And I'm happy to send that to you. So jordan@elitebsc.com, you can shoot me an email, and I'll give you that little cheat sheet. So here's some free stuff that we use. Chamber of Commerce or economic development sites. Most of your cities that have at least 50,000 people in a particular county or city or whatever are going to have some kind of economic development website. And often there is some level of information about the larger employers in the area, or maybe even lists of employers by different verticals, ranked by size or other things. So usually I've been on some sites that it's a very comprehensive list where they're naming every large employer all the way down to people that have 30 and 40 employees, which is great. There's been other places where I've struggled to find the kind of data that I'm looking for and might just get a few names of some of the bigger employers in an area. So, but that's a good place to start. There's also public databases. So, for instance, there is a private school search site that I use that is pretty handy. And you can put in some search criteria. You can search public schools or private schools. You can pick a specific geography that you want to search in, and you can put the minimum number of students in the school to search for, which is really helpful in identifying the private schools that you're looking for. So, and just maybe as a little case study here, if we're doing private schools, if that's a particular segment I'm searching, I'm going to go to this website. I'm going to pull the big list. I'm going to put in my criteria and pull a list of all the private schools that seem to meet that criteria. And then I'm going to go dig in on each of their websites and see if, in fact, it's a viable prospect. And then lastly, and this is another place that we're looking, is I'm going to go to Google Maps, and I'm going to click on the aerial view, and I'm going to zoom in. I might even do some street view, and I'm just going to virtually check out the place and see what it looks like. So this moves me into the next free tool that we use often, which is Google Maps. And with Google Maps, usually the way this works for us, sometimes we just straight up search an area and we just start combing the area with Google Maps. And we're looking for big buildings. We're looking for office parks and industrial parks. But then also, sometimes what we'll do is we'll pull our list from, a paid source. And then as we're going and checking out each one of the individual places and see if, yes, they're possible, or, oh, no, I don't think that's one that we want. We'll often find that they are surrounded by other facilities that we would want that maybe didn't show up on the list that we paid for. And so once we identify, let's say, a manufacturing plant, and it's in an industrial park, well, then when we're searching on Google Maps to look at that one industrial plant to check it out, see if it's a viable option for us, we'll then start combing the map, looking at all the other manufacturing and warehousing facilities that are in that particular industrial park, and then make a note of those on our list, and then maybe dig in further as we're looking for contact data. So that is Google Maps is great. You can also just use straight up Google searches, and you want to be pretty specific on these. So, like for instance, like let's say that you're looking for medical, for instance, in an area. Well, you could just start searching for the kinds of medical facilities you're looking for. So you can search for surgery centers in, whatever area that you're trying to search for, or family medical practices or whatever. And again, this can be a little bit labor intensive, and you may sort through a lot of stuff. Or you may find like an aggregating site that lists all of those in your particular area. So some Google searches can be helpful on this kind of thing. And then ChatGPT can be helpful as well. Again, it's more just for helping you assemble maybe some big picture stuff that's publicly available, and ChatGPT can aggregate some of that data for you, and I found that to be helpful. If I keep asking them what are the larger employers in an area, and then they give me 10, and I say give me 10 more, and then it'll give me 10 more, and I go through that iteration a handful of times, and that can be a helpful source there to help me build out a pretty comprehensive list. So these are a bunch of tools. There's so much available now if you're trying to do this. And you can do it really bootstrapping, or if you've got some money and want to speed up the process, you can pay for some data. But I think these are good places. Now, the last thing in building your list that you want to do is, and this is what we do, is we try to identify 2 or 3 people in the facility that we think might be decision makers. So we need a starting point in order to start calling or emailing or whatever to try to initiate contact with a facility. And we all know there's 1 or 2 people that ultimately make the decision, maybe a couple of more that are in the buying process in some way, shape, or form. And so we're trying to use an educated guess to figure out who we should at least start with in that outreach process. And I think again, this is one where you're probably going to have to pay for some data to at least get started. If you want to go the slow route, which you certainly can, you could probably start searching LinkedIn for people. I think you pay for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and you can start searching for people that work for a company in a given geography, look up titles. Now, LinkedIn's not going to give you their contact info, but there's some other, browser extensions you can use that maybe will give you some emails. You may start searching those people's names, see if you can get emails to pop up on Google somewhere, or you can go pay for the data to try to find it. Again, lots of sources that you can dig around in to try to do that stuff. But when building the list, we want to build a pretty comprehensive list of the companies that we'd like to go after. But then after that, we want to build a list of at least one or two names in each facility that we think would be a good place to start with. So this is the approach that we use. We've used it for a long time. We've gotten better at it, but this is what we're doing for our clients. And so I think this is a great second step. And I think it really helps us narrow in. If we do this well and we do it thoroughly, we will have built an ideal client profile, and we will have built a list of companies that we would love to go after, that we'd love to land. And so it's really narrowed in our focus. I mean, even if you only get 200 companies or 300 companies, you can now be hyper-focused on those. And you only need a few of those a year in order to grow at the rate that you would like to grow. So this is a good next step in that process. So I hope this is helpful. Again, reach out to me if you would like a copy of that research guide. And in the next episode, we'll continue on, and we'll be moving into identifying decision makers and outsource status, given the list that we started with. So we'll see you on the next episode. If you found the information in this podcast helpful, please like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform that you're using. If you would like more resources or help to grow your cleaning company, head over to elitebsc.com. We have loads of articles, videos, free tools, coaching options, and a lot more. If your company is greater than $500K in revenue and you want to take your learning experience to the next level, check out our mastermind group. You can learn more about that at elitebsc.com/mastermind.